Hello and happy new year. Welcome to the Genuine Learning blog. My name is Melissa Galasso, and today we're going to take a look at 2021 as our ANA year in review. 2021 was not exactly what we had in mind after 2020, but we did get through some really interesting ANA projects. And so a lot of things kept moving despite COVID. In 2020, a lot of the standard setters either delayed standards or slowed down standard setting, and realizing the length that this pandemic was going to have, we started to see a pickup in 2021. So we're going to give a quick closure to 2021 before we keep moving on in the blog, because we have a lot of really cool things that did come out that we want to address that came out during our 2-week vacation. So the AICPA only issued 2 standards final in 2021. One was SAS 144, which makes some amendments to SAS 143, and also addresses some PCAOB items, and so specifically related to use of pricing information. So there's a new appendix that they've added, very similar to what came out of the PCAOB in the same area. In addition, they issued SAS 145, which was what we were really waiting for, which was risk assessment. So they went back through the risk assessment suite and made some pretty big changes, updated the definition of inherent risk, updated the definition of internal control, changed the definition of significant risk, evaluation of risk is done differently, and so really focused on IT. So this is a brand new standard, not effective till 2023. Same as SAS 144 and 143. SAS 142 will be effective in 2022. But SAS 145 making some pretty big changes to risk assessment, giving us some time to get ready for it after implementing the auditor's reporting suite in 2021. They also issued a lot of interpretive guidance, a lot of it COVID related, how to account for, restaurant revitalization funds, how do we handle the CFA when you have provider relief funds and they don't tie to the financial statements. They also addressed performing third-party assessments as well as some SEC guidance. And so some of these interpretive guidance can be very helpful. So you do want to take a look at those. And the big topic of 2021 was the proposals for quality management. You'll see that we have the SQMS 1, which is the system of quality management. Today we talk about quality control, really moving to a risk-based approach. Each firm would have to do their own risk assessment of their industries and their client base, and then come back and figure out what the appropriate response is instead of sort of a check-the-box methodology. SQMS 2 introduces a separate standard for engagement quality reviews, which is one response to risk assessment. Again, if you don't choose to use it, you don't have to use it. But if you do use a quality review, it's going to provide the guidance on the requirements related to that. In addition to that, they also proposed a SAS related to quality management for how would you have to update AUC Section 220 to reflect the changes in the system of quality management. So a big SAS there. That was issued as a big group. They actually originally had an earlier comment letter date. They pushed it back until August. They've already started talking about it, so we do expect something to come out of that relatively soon, especially because the international version is already effective. They also talked about NOCLAR in both the ethics side of the house as well as the audit side of the house. So you'll see that there are some discussions in terms of how do you respond to noncompliance on the ethics side, and then how do we discuss noncompliance with laws and regulations for the SAS side of the house. So both of those kind of came out as a group. And then they also had a proposed SARS on quality management, because again, it's not complete without, addressing all of the areas where we have to think about the engagement types. And so that was a big proposal there as well. Really very similar to the SAS, just incorporating that into the reviews, comps, and preparation engagements. FASB issued a total of 10 ASUs, not a record, not the smallest, not the largest amount, but a nice size for 2021. Some of them were very niche. Some of them were really helpful. Starting with ASU 2021-01, which was scope related to reference rate reform, really expanding that to anything that was impacted by reference rate reform, not necessarily that the related rate was going away. So they kind of adjusted for discounting, margining, et cetera. ASU 2021-02 was a big help for franchisors who are private companies and gives a practical expedient as well as a nice alternative for private companies who are franchisors, right? So they're the ones selling the right to license their business model, and how can they handle performance obligations under revenue recognition. So great standard there. Another one that really was aimed at our 2020 year end, but didn't come out until March of 2021, was accounting alternatives for evaluating triggering events, giving private companies the alternative to only look at their year end or at the time that they're making a financial statement to decide whether or not there's a triggering event without having to look through the period. Really a response to COVID-19 there. 2021-04 reduces, this is really for warrants and those types of items. So if you have a freestanding equity classified written call option, they reduce the number of different models out there, make that a little bit easier. 2021-05 addresses lessor accounting. So with leases effective this year, there was an issue with, in particular, in the sales type and direct financing leases, you take those off the books and then instead recognize a net investment in lease. Well, in some scenarios where there's significant variable consideration that doesn't get included because it's not tied to an index or a rate, there would actually be a day one loss when you would do that. And so they say in those scenarios, you wouldn't have a direct financing or a sales type lease. Instead, you would have an operating leases, because an operating lease, you don't take the asset off the books. So a little bit of a benefit there. 2021-06 is related to SEC related items. 2021-07 is a PCC alternative to allow us to use some IRS rules to evaluate some of the inputs into our evaluation for equity classified share-based payments. So very well received item there. 2021-08 addresses when you have a business combination and you're buying contract assets under Topic 606, what is the appropriate accounting? Do you fair value that? Do you use Topic 606? It addresses that conundrum. ASU 2021-09 provides a little bit of a better usage of the private company alternative for discount rates. So under the leases standard, again, implementing it this year, you have to have a discount rate in order to get that present value calculation, and you're supposed to use the rate implicit in the lease. But even if you look at Microsoft didn't know the rates implicit in their lease. And so if you don't have that, you have your incremental borrowing rate. Now, for many entities, that would be difficult and cumbersome to calculate, so they give a private company alternative. Originally, the private company alternative was an all in or all out, right? So you were either, you'd have to use it for all leases or you couldn't use it for any leases. What ASU 2021-09 does is say that you can do it by class of assets instead. You don't have to be all in or all out, making it a little bit more of a friendly option. And then probably one of the more interesting ones of 2021 was our last ASU of the year, which is related to government assistance disclosures. And this is for for-profit entities. It's for business entities about the federal funding that they received. In particular, those that are using either 958-605 or IFRS for the accounting, it's going to provide some additional disclosures about what methodology they're using, what the terms of these awards are, so that people can better understand that. Obviously, with the amount of COVID-related funding out there, that will be a very useful disclosure. So FASB got quite a lot done in terms of the issued standards. They also updated 2 concept statements. Probably did not get a lot of attention. This is actually going to be coming up in our next blog. It came out after we started our holiday break, but they updated Chapter 4, which is the elements. The definition of an asset is changing. The definition of a liability is changing. Some pretty big differences there. So we're going to talk a little about that on an upcoming blog, as well as Chapter 7 on presentation. And that is going to address something, about the location of how we describe disclosure-related items. So we'll kind of go through that as well. They also managed to propose 7 items while they were, in addition to the 10 they issued plus the 2 concept statements, they proposed 7 items. One of them is related to the disclosure framework. So we've already implemented 2018-13. Last year, 2018-14 is being implemented right now. And so 2021-01, the proposed ASU 2021-001 is related to disclosures for interim disclosures. So they took that same yes-no checklist in Chapter 3 of the conceptual framework and Chapter 3? No, Chapter 8. Chapter 8. And then applied it to the interim disclosure. So you'll get a chance to see that proposal. They also addressed hedging, in particular the portfolio layer method. So we expect to see that to come out soon, as hedging was effective last year. The discount rate managed to be proposed and finalized all in the same year. So that's awesome. Probably one of the biggest events of 2021, though, was the invitation to comment. So obviously with the agenda consultation there, They were looking for feedback on what to do next. We've done RevRec, we've done leases, we've done CECL. What is the next project that FASB should be looking at? And so they gave us some ideas, but they also asked for our own opinions. And so that was a hot topic. They've been talking about it at their recent meetings. And so we'll kind of see, we've already seen some of our last blog where we talked about some of the research projects that they were working on and moved to the research agenda. You're going to see some impact on that as well. Fair value of an equity security subject to contractual sale restrictions. We covered that in the blog, as well as more related to hedging, in particular here, not hedging, CECL, related to troubled debt restructurings and the CECL model, as well as vintage disclosures. So again, CECL coming up for a lot of entities. And then ASU 2021-007, which is disclosures related to finance program, supplier finance program obligations. They've done a lot of outreach on that to try to understand these types of programs, and so this also will be an upcoming blog that came out after we went on our holiday recess. In terms of GASB, they issued their ACFR, the Annual Comprehensive Financial Report, replacing the previous Comprehensive Annual Financial Report because the acronym, when pronounced, was a racial slur, and obviously that's not very inclusive, so they updated it to the ACFR to reduce an uninclusive feeling there. And they also issued their implementation guide for 2021. They've been really working hard on their revenue recognition, their revenue and expense recognition model, as well as their financial reporting model. It's a big focus of GASB, but they also managed to get out some exposure drafts related to compensated absences. Again, they issued the annual comprehensive financial report, accounting changes, their omnibus, which they do pretty frequently, and then they re-exposed note disclosures. After they originally put out there, they got a lot of feedback, and instead of just issuing, they put out a new proposal to get more feedback. So hopefully we'll see that finalized in early 2022. So 2021 definitely led to some really interesting standards. So that's just a little smorgasbord of what you should know that's out there. And hopefully we'll see those start to kind of either be finalized for those that were proposals or, become effective as we look forward. So that's our 2021 ANA year in review. We wish you all a wonderful, prosperous, happy, joyous 2022. And we look forward to a year full of fun blogs as well. We already have a big lineup in 2022. Our January is already completely full with topics that issued recently. So we will keep you up to date. So I want to thank you guys so much. And we wish you a wonderful rest of 2022.